Hey guys, it's Dave. To my subscribers, welcome back. I'm so glad you're continuing to watch, and to any new viewers out there, I hope you do enjoy the content, find it useful, and maybe by the end of the video, you'll consider joining us and becoming a subscriber as well. Definitely every single one really helps out the channel. Today, what I'm doing is covering the latest news in the space industry for space investors. We've got a ton of news in the space industry over the past couple weeks, and I just wanted to round it all up for you, put it all in one place so to get everyone up to speed. With that out of the way, let's dive right in. So first of all, Astra recently just had their second annual Spacetech Day. This is basically an investor day where they unveil their newest technology, show off what they've been working on, and talk about the future of the company, kind of just like a regular investor day, really. And I have to say, overall, I wasn't too impressed. Obviously, I've made no secret of the fact that I'm not too impressed with Astra as a whole as a company, but basically there wasn't a ton of huge news. They were talking about their spacecraft engine business, supplying that for other companies, really putting a lot of focus on that, trying to show that they're not just a launch company, but I think they really do have a long way to grow if they want to be a complete end-to-end space company. They also did talk about their Rocket 4, progress being made there. At the end, they also unveiled, not too sure which one it is, let me know down in the comments below, their prototype for their new Rocket 4.0 system after, as we all know, they previously canceled Rocket 3. Probably the biggest piece of news, which wasn't even really complete news because we did get an announcement a little bit beforehand, was that they will be using a third-party supplier for the engine of their upper stage of Rocket 4.0. They'll be going with Ursa Major to supplying the Hadley engine to power the upper stage. Found this to be an interesting move because more and more people are trying to go for full vertical integration, whereas here with Astra, they're contracting that out to a third-party supplier, but hopefully it will allow them to launch much more quickly than if they were developing the upper stage engine as well themselves. There's definitely a massive elephant in the room that didn't get discussed, and that's what's going on with their finances. How are they going to reach profitability? How are they going to get through and make it to launching Rocket 4? I suppose that's not something you generally go over on a technology day or an investor day, so maybe they would leave stuff like that to other events or, you know, earnings calls and things like that. But I remain skeptical of this company. I would not advise anyone to invest in it. As a space fan, I still do wish them the best, but I can't put any money here. I have a lot of doubts that they will be able to reach profitability as a company, even reaching the first launch of Rocket 4.0. Even if they do get to that point, that is so far away from profitability that it's not even really funny. It can take many years after a rocket's first launch to get up that cadence, get up that scale. And we also didn't get any firm information on, you know, backlog, future flights, when the date of their first launch will be. We just have a year. We don't have an exact date. So a lot of unknowns. There wasn't really Q&A either, just a straight up presentation. So that's what we got from Astra's Investor Day, if you are an investor in Astra at this point. If you are an investor in Astra, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below. Definitely interested to hear other perspectives. And then we had a Twitter space from Elon Musk where he was talking about all things Starship. It's kind of interesting that we're in a day and age now where you can get more good information from an impromptu Twitter space online than articles and news outlets and stuff like that, but that's kind of where we are right now. So there's a lot of interesting information released on this Twitter space, and obviously SpaceX, not a publicly traded company, but Starship has massive implications for the entire space industry and all the other space companies out there, so definitely something worth following. I'm sure you all watched their first test flight of their Starship recently and the epic explosion that followed. So we have some new details as the company has performed a post-mortem of the Starship. It gets ready for their next launch, and just the thoughts of Elon on their progress. So apparently when the rocket lifted off, there were 3 engines that did not light because the flight software did not deem them healthy enough, but they did still have 30 engines firing, which is the minimum amount needed to launch a Starship, so they continued with their flight. Elon said he did not believe that these 3 engines were actually damaged by the gravel and concrete kicked up. So I know when I talked about the Starship launch, I got a lot of feedback saying, you know, I was concerned about Raptor reliability, never said, oh, don't worry about it, it's probably just the concrete and dust being kicked up. Apparently not, at least in the case of these 3 engines. So definitely some work to be done, although these were earlier models and there have been improvements to the engine, and from what I hear, they are manufacturing a ton of them right now. So the direct quote from Elon is that, weirdly, we did not see evidence of the rock tornado actually damaging engines or heat shields in a material way. It may have been, but we have not yet seen evidence of that. He continued on that something bad happened at T plus 27 seconds because engine 19 lost all communications and some kind of explosion happened to knock out the heat shield of engines 17, 18, 19, and 20. There were visible fires seen from the aft end of the vehicle for the remainder of the flight, but the rocket kept going. Then at T plus 62 seconds, we saw additional aft heat shield damage near engine 30. However, the engine continued to run. And then at T plus 85 seconds after launch is where things really hit the fan. At this point, the rocket started to lose its vector control, or the ability to steer itself, and this led to the initiation of the flight termination system. Now, the flight termination system is supposed to basically blow up the rocket right away whenever things go out of control, to make sure that you have a controlled explosion far away from any infrastructure or people that might get hurt. However, there was a 40-second delay from when they triggered that flight termination system for when it actually took effect, which is a really unacceptable lag for a system like this. It should be almost instantaneous trigger explosion. So that's probably the longest lead item for requalification, Musk said. I know Rocket Lab fans out there have been aware that flight termination systems are a big deal. It caused like almost a 2-year delay for finally taking off at Wallops as we waited for NASA to qualify a new FTS system for that location. So that's obviously one of the big deals they need to get sorted out for the next flight, along with repairing their ground systems and getting the next rocket ready to go. In terms of Stage 0, Musk said that they're going to be putting down a lot of steel around the area of the rocket's base, which he characterized as a mega steel pancake. This will provide both strength and cooling below the rocket by pumping water upwards to dampen the exhaust from Rocket 33's engines. Musk anticipates that SpaceX will be ready with a second Starship in 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of people were speculating if they'd even get another one off the ground by the end of this year, so he's obviously extremely confident and extremely ambitious. But the big but there is the FAA, and we'll have to wait and see when they allow a next flight. There have been some lawsuits, some issues around environment and forest fires and things of that nature in the area, so it's really up in the air when it comes to certification when they'll be allowed to take their next flight. He said that for the next launch, he thinks they have a greater than 50% chance of actually reaching orbit, which would be extremely exciting, and he's hoping that they can get 4 or maybe 5 flights out this year, which would definitely outpace what most people are expecting. On a note of more caution, I know a lot of people are kind of saying, well, Starship's going to be reusable really soon, so why bother even working on anything else? He did say he thinks it will probably take a few more years to achieve reusability on a regular basis, where they bring the booster back to land and it is caught. So it'll take several years to get to where the Falcon 9 is today, and just because we have the first test launch of the Starship does not by any means mean it'll be regularly launching payloads reusably next year or something like that. And then we do have some news from Rocket Lab as well. Unfortunately, we've had bad weather yet again, delaying Rocket Lab's launch of the Tropics satellites. Rocket Lab has had really bad luck with this. We had several delays from their new Wallops launch facility over in the United States, and now in New Zealand we're having weather delays as well. Really rough, but I'm confident we will get those off the ground pretty soon. NASA does want them in the air, you know, by sometime in May to really get operating for the hurricane season. The whole purpose of the satellites is to monitor hurricanes and perform science, so obviously you need to have them up and operating before hurricane season starts. So we are on a bit of a timer for that, but luckily Rocket Lab has quite a responsive launch setup where they own their own launch pad. They've got plenty of launch windows, and I'm sure they'll get those off the ground shortly and execute for NASA, as they always do. We also had some interesting updates from Varda's Photon. So if you're not familiar with this, Varda is a customer of Rocket Lab, and they're going to be doing in-space manufacturing, which is an extremely interesting field, something that's really just up and coming. And they're saying Rocket Lab will be launching their space factories. I do find this kind of funny to call something so small a space factory. We're talking like, you know, couple 100 kilograms maybe. They're working, I believe, mostly on pharmaceuticals. Apparently there's a lot of interesting things you can do to develop these pharmaceuticals and crystals up in microgravity or no gravity that you can't do down in orbit. And there's also a re-entry vehicle attached to this Photon where they will do their manufacturing, send the results back down to Earth. We're seeing Rocket Lab's full integration in effect here, as we have Rocket Lab radios, Rocket Lab reaction wheels, Rocket Lab star trackers all being used. And I really just am excited to see more Photons launching, because I think this is something that Rocket Lab has invested in heavily, and I want to see many, many Photons launching every year to really justify that investment, whether it's to low Earth orbit, to Venus, to Mars, to the moon. So many different possibilities for this spacecraft bus. The current contract is for a total of 4 of these Varda Space factories to be made by Rocket Lab. Definitely a big contract for them. I think I'm going to be diving deeper in the future, looking into the future of in-orbit manufacturing. Let me know if you think this is a topic that would interest you. I know it's something Redwire has also looked at closely. There's a lot of space companies looking into this industry right now. Next up, we've heard news that the International Space Station's lifespan has been officially extended out until 2028, which I am of two minds about. I think it's great because so much money has been put into the space station. It would be really a shame to see it just burn up in the atmosphere after so many launches, so much hardware has gone into it. It's got so much history too. I do remain a little skeptical that we'll ever see a Neutron launching a capsule for people to go to the ISS. I think the likelihood that Neutron will be launching by then is quite high, but to have a whole new capsule and to send it to the space station, I don't think makes a lot of sense when you already have a Dragon capsule going. I'd love to see a Neutron capsule in the future, and hopefully we do have a vibrant space economy where it could be either space tourism, just going around the Earth like we've already seen, or perhaps future commercial space stations in the future. I'd even love to see a future for the ISS where it expands beyond 2028, somehow transitions to a more commercial ownership, whether that's like space hotel, more commercial space experiments, space manufacturing, and we could see NASA's budget get devoted to the moon and beyond. I think that would be a great future. But the ISS has been taking up a lot of NASA's budget for the past few years. So I think beyond 2028, it's quite possible we could see that changing. Let me know, do you think that it's likely Neutron will launch a capsule and have it dock to the ISS before the ISS gets retired? Interested to hear your comments down below. Now, for Virgin Galactic investors, we do have some news for them. They finally took to the air with their VSS Unity spacecraft after a couple years being grounded, performing upgrades and investigations. This company really needs to start launching this spacecraft on a very regular basis in order to really justify the cash burn we've been seeing over the past few years. They do have quite a good amount of cash on hand, unlike, you know, a Virgin Orbit, so they're not about to go out of business anytime soon, but they really need to get this launching extremely regularly. I remain skeptical on this company as well. Not something I would consider investing in. I just don't see the market for enough of these launches. They would have to launch so many of them in order to justify the cash burn. I hope I'm wrong again. As a space enthusiast, I'd love to see them kind of kicking off a vibrant suborbital space tourism industry. But the technology is very interesting. I wish them the best, and I'm glad to see that this glide test was a success. We don't have a clear date on when we'll be launching next and when they'll be resuming commercial operations, but I hope it's very soon. I remain underweight on the company though, and it's not something I'm looking at investing in right now. We've also been continuing to follow the ULA Sale very closely. Earlier this year, there was a leak that it looks like ULA, one of the longest serving space companies with quite a heritage of success. It's co-owned by Boeing and Lockheed Martin. It looks like Boeing wants to sell their share in ULA. So really interesting to see who's going to end up buying this company. Tory Bruno is the CEO, obviously. He's quite a charismatic guy. He's been around the industry for quite a while. It looks like most of the internet speculation right now has Lockheed Martin in the lead as the most likely candidate to buy out Boeing's share. Lockheed's done quite well in the space area for this past several years. Kind of unlike Boeing, they've had a lot of troubles with their SLS spacecraft and also their Starliner capsule. So many delays on that. They've had to put in a lot more money than they expected. So I think they're really trying to just divest from the space industry a little bit right now. But other names are being thrown around. You see people talking about Blue Origin or others. So we'll really see what happens. I don't think there's that many companies that would be interested in buying ULA. So definitely a small playing field. It'll be interesting to see how this shapes up. And we also have some news on Virgin Orbit's bankruptcy. I covered this topic in depth as it's occurred. Some of you might remember my video where I was kind of calling that it looked like they were going to go bankrupt before they bid. I even talked about shorting the company, which I never did, but if I had, I would have done very well on that trade. Something I might be a little bit more open to in the future, although it never does feel great betting on someone to fail. But the latest news anyway is that a federal bankruptcy court has approved plans to conduct a sale of Virgin Orbit's assets this month. And this could result in either new ownership for the launch provider or its complete dissolution as a company. So potential bidders have until May 4th to submit non-binding indications of interest with formal bids due on May 15th. If that process results in more than one qualified bid, an auction will take place on May 18th. A hearing is then scheduled on 24th in bankruptcy court. There was a comment from CEO Dan Hart. He said that they continue to make important progress and remain focused on positioning the company to complete our sale process to the benefit of all stakeholders. He continued, "We remain committed to working with our investors and creditors throughout this process to achieve an optimal outcome for everyone." Space investors are likely familiar with this process. We've had many space companies go through bankruptcy and come out the other side. So it's not definitely the death knell for the company. Firefly previously went out of business once, went through bankruptcy. There's a lot of companies that have, but it definitely doesn't look good either. So CEO Hart is hoping for a sale to a new owner who will continue operating the company. However, bidders can propose to just purchase some subset of the company's assets, like their plane, like some of their other equipment. And if that maximizes value for creditors, that's kind of what has to happen. So we'll have to wait and see if the company will continue as a company or if their assets are just going to be auctioned off. If that happens, that's pretty much the end of the company. Clearly, you know, if they have to sell their plane and equipment, they're not going to keep operating. Definitely something I'll watch very closely. I don't really know if I think they're going to continue operating beyond this. I think it's a very tough road ahead for this company to emerge from bankruptcy, but we'll see what happens. And up next, Redwire Space. Back on April 24th, Redwire's ICAP system launched from Northern Europe. This launch was an instrument that simulates the early stages of planetary formation and enables scientists to study the interactions of micron-sized dust particles and their agglomeration. So interestingly enough, this rocket does not need to go into orbit. It only needs to provide a few minutes, which 6 in this case, of microgravity and then return to Earth. So glad to see Redwire had another successful mission and are still performing interesting science. For AST Space Mobile, they announced they successfully performed their first ever two-way voice call with their new Blue Walker 3 satellite in orbit. This call was performed to an unmodified smartphone, meaning pretty much any smartphone could have a two-way voice call using a satellite in orbit. Really interesting stuff. Congratulations to AST Space Mobile. Engineers from Vodafone, Rakuten, and AT&T all participated in the preparation and testing for the voice call with the Blue Walker 3 satellite. Chairman and CEO Abel Avelin said that achieving what many considered to be impossible, we have reached the most significant milestone to date in our quest to deliver global cellular broadband from space. While we take a moment to celebrate this tremendous accomplishment, we remain focused on the path ahead and pivotal next steps that will get us closer to our goal of transforming the way the world connects. Also, we have a little bit of interesting news from Black Sky. You might recognize them if you're a Rocket Lab investor. We did just launch a satellite for them from the New Virginia launch site extremely recently, so they are a familiar name in the industry operating imaging satellites. And they actually applied for an emergency permission to lower the orbit on 2 of their satellites. Now, the application was partially redacted, so we can't see what the emergency is exactly, but we do know this would obviously allow them to improve their resolution, being closer to the ground. But very curious, I'm not too sure what possible emergency could justify being able to lower your satellite's orbit like this, maybe a potential collision or something like that. Not too sure. Let me know if you have any more information on this down in the comments below. Finally, in terms of the overall markets, all eyes today are on the Federal Reserve. They'll be making a decision soon regarding the next rate hike or lack thereof for interest rates. The large consensus is that we'll be seeing a 25 basis point hike, which is relatively small. And then a lot of people are more curious on what will happen after that and kind of the language Jerome Powell uses going forward. So personally, I wouldn't mind seeing a pause right now, but I think a hike is the most likely. If we're lucky, maybe he'll kind of signal that they're kind of thinking about pausing rate hikes after this or use more dovish language. That could potentially help out stocks, especially space stocks, who are extremely vulnerable to interest rates, especially as they continue to have to raise money. Most of these companies are not yet profitable yet, and they really do rely on raising capital, raising debt. So it has been tough for them, this environment of raising interest rates. Hopefully we're starting to come to an end to that soon. We'll have to wait and see. By the time you're watching this video, you might know for sure what the Fed did decide, and let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. So that's all I have for you today. A lot of news. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please give me a like and subscribe. Every single one of those really helps out the algorithm. I'm thinking about making a new investment soon in a new space company, and obviously still heavily invested in Rocket Lab. I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope you have a great week. Bye for now.